I was going to give a title to these few words today, I think I would call it Tuning into KGOD. And when you're in nature, you know, it's easy to think about how God communicates with us through nature, but also how He communicates to us through that still small voice. I love John 10:27, my sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. And, you know, God obviously knows every one of us, but He singles out those who hear His voice in a special way. He knows them in a special way, and they know Him in a special way because they follow Him. They follow His leading and guidance and direction. And, you know, that's not an easy thing for us as human beings. We tend to get set in our ways, and that's one reason that young people here, they're more tuned into the spiritual realm than adults tend to be. And it's not uncommon for children to say, you know, they hear the voice of God, and that God speaks to them, and that you know, they're also more tuned into the spiritual realm in other ways, and the enemy tries to take advantage of that. But that's why it's so important for our children to know that God is speaking to them, and they can talk to Him, and He hears them. And having that powerful communication, even when kids are very young, like Samuel had, is so important for adults to point that out to kids and have them anticipate that and expect that. But it's also a challenge for us as adults not to get so set in our ways that we get off the channel, you know, tuning into KGOD, hearing what His voice is for us even as adults. And I think that's, you know, a huge challenge. In many ways, it's the greatest challenge that we have spiritually, to keep tuned into God, to keep hearing His voice, even when we've worshipped Him and known Him for years. We can then think, well, I know what His directions are, but His past directions might not always be His present directions, and we want to be tuned into His present directions for us. And those can be scary, because He might ask us to change something, and the more set we are in our ways, the less we tend to want to change something.
Amen.
But it's you know, it's like anything in life with communication. Communication's always a challenge. It's a challenge in marriage. You know, I think there are just hundreds of books written on communication in marriage, and one of the best ones is called Please Understand Me. It's just a great book on how men and women tend to think differently, communicate differently. Bill Hybels and his wife wrote a book called Fit to be Tied, which has a double meaning. You know, it's a book on preparing to get married, but it's also a book on all the challenges of being married in terms of communication, and how easy it is for couples to get frustrated and stuff when they don't communicate on the same wavelength. And that's really more the rule than the exception, because men and women can so easily be on different channels of communication. But you know, when we think about just being up here in the mountains, the challenges of communication, did we talk to Larry and Barbara? Did we talk to Patricia? Does everyone know what we're doing, where we're meeting, where we're going? You know, it's a challenge. Even though we're all kind of close together up here, we're still in different spots, and trying to keep track of everybody and what's going on. But the biggest challenges are our challenge with God, to be on the wavelength that God wants us to be. And, you know, I think people naturally ask the question, why doesn't God just obviously speak and communicate to each one of us? And He obviously doesn't do that, because a lot of people in the world don't even believe in God. And there are many who believe in God, but believe in a form of deism, like our founding fathers, which is that God created everything and set it in motion, but He has nothing to do with intervening in His creation after that. So that deistic view is that God doesn't communicate with us in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of Christians have practical deism. Even though they might not be deists, they might basically go about their everyday lives with the idea that, hey, God doesn't speak to people. And even when the vice president, talked about hearing from God, a lot of people were making fun of that, acting
well, sometimes they make it psychiatric.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like you're hearing voices.
Right. And, so what does the Bible say about hearing God? I think it's not only that my sheep hear my voice, but how do his sheep hear his voice? And two texts that come to mind on that are Jeremiah 29:11. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. That God expects us to take the initiative in this communication process. And the other one that jumps out at me is James 4:8. Draw near to me, and I will draw near to you. God's saying you need to take the initiative in drawing near to me. Obviously, he takes the initiative in loving us. He loves us unconditionally. He loves us in spite of ourselves. He loves us even if we hate him. God always takes the initiative in loving us and protecting us and caring for us and giving us all the things that he gives us. But he doesn't take the initiative in communicating with us. It's not like God's always talking to us. He doesn't impose himself on us generally. He kind of did with Saul, and you might ask the question, well, why doesn't he do that with everybody? And I think the reason that he did that very exceptional thing with Saul is that the whole New Testament church was interceding against Saul or about Saul. They were interceding for Saul, really, and interceding against the demonic principalities that were controlling him. But Jesus had said, pray for your enemies, and their greatest enemy was Saul. He was the one hunting them down and putting them to death. So I think, when there's that kind of intercession, calling God to act, he will act, even if it's not the normal way he acts. And so, it's probably a good thing he doesn't act that way with everyone, because that would really violate our free nature if God was like imposing himself on everyone to that degree. But obviously Paul had a very key role to fill. He's the greatest Bible writer of the New Testament. And so that was a very exceptional case that God knocked him to the ground and blinded him and did everything that he did there. But generally speaking, he leaves it to us to take the initiative. Draw near to me, and I will draw near to you. And so that's a very important thing for us to keep in mind, that he wants us to take the initiative in seeking him and communicating with him and speaking with him and asking him to speak to us and give us direction and guidance and all those things. So, I don't know if it's easier to do in the mountains or not. I do know that getting away from the routine, at least for me, always kind of opens up new opportunities to think in different ways and to spend more time outside a normal schedule, which I think is good. But it's really the mindset, it's really the heart that is the crucial thing. Obviously you can be in the mountains and not give God a second thought. And you can be anywhere and not give God a second thought. On the other hand, you can have the busiest schedule imaginable, but God is at the center of that schedule, and you're thinking about God and tuning into God and asking God for direction through each part of your schedule each day. And clearly that's what God wants for us, is to be continually seeking him, continually seeking his direction, continually open to his words. And I thought it would be fun as we close to just do a little Bible charades, because that's a form of communication.
Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love, the fellowship of kings.
Amen.